Recording in progress.
Oh, I've never heard a man's voice do that before. Welcome, Estrella. Glad you're here. We are just getting started. I need to put a live stream into Facebook, and then we will be, yes, closed captions. I'll get that in just a second. Oh, whoops, it's in the wrong one.
Bear with us.
Bear with us.
Everything.
Tech. Drives me crazy. All right, let's try this again. Live to Facebook.
Welcome,
Those of you who are joining us,
yeah,
sorry. Hello, Andy. Hello, Christina. Hello, Estrella. Go ahead and put your location in the chat. We're not live yet on Facebook, but I'm getting there, and we won't say your last names ever. Oh, it's still going to that one. Okay, I know why. Okay, hold on.
yeah, please let us know where you're from in the chat. And we're very excited for this evening. Just give us a moment trying to get Facebook up and going.
From South Florida.
Oh, lots happening in Florida.
Oh, yes, indeed. All right, I know why. Oh, there it is. Okay, I have to minimize that, and then I can go into my, okay. All right, sorry about the delay. And hello, Yusuke. I hope I said that right. Please put the phonetics in there if I did not. All right, and I'm gonna go live. All right, so welcome. This is yeah, we're going on 3+ years doing this webinar, a Candid Conversation about systemic racism, and just delighted to be sharing. Oh, let me put on closed captions. Totally forgot. Yikes. Captions. Okay. I think they should be on. Okay. So if you're here in the attendees, then please, North Florida. Okay. If you're here as attendees, you can put in the chat where you're calling in from. If you're on Facebook, feel free to post underneath the video where you're watching from. And then if you're on YouTube watching the replay, feel free to put like #replay and introduce yourself and say hello. We're looking forward to this wonderful, peaceful, loving conversation with our friend Earl, and oh, from Canada. Awesome, very cool. So do you want to start with oh no, I do the start. Okay, so doing the recognition that we always do here, which is our acknowledgements and our the things that are important for us and what we value here in our space that we've created is that all land is Indigenous land, that all races, genders, cultures, abilities, sexual orientations are valued here, heard here, accepted here, and welcome here. We have created this webinar to be a safe space where our guests, our panelists, can land softly. And that's a term I believe was coined by Sonia Renee Taylor. You can look her up on Instagram. The Body is Not an Apology, or under Sonia Renee Taylor herself. And what that means, landing softly in a safe space, is that when our panelists come to share who they are and what their experiences have been with systemic racism, that none of us are here to disagree or argue with their experience, because it was their experience. And I could say that over and over and over again. It also means that we offer love and encouragement. If you make comments in the chat, it is through love and encouragement that we support each other. And then finally, just to say that our panelist, Earl Simms, gets to decide to talk about whatever he feels he wants to talk about. You know, really glad to have you here, Earl. Thank you. He gets to choose. He gets to choose whether he talks to, and he gets to change his mind. If he's starting to talk about something and it's kind of choking him up or uncomfortable, or, you know, it's just like, no, that's too traumatic, I don't want to go there. He gets to stop. And we just get to be witness and hold space for, Earl to share what's on his mind and on his heart, without debate. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, you're up.
So Misha came up with this idea for the webinar and started it, and then asked me to facilitate it with her and be here with her. And the webinar was created to engage in honest and authentic conversations about the longtime injustice of racism in America. And during the webinars, we discussed systemic racism in an effort to dismantle white supremacy. And we're using the word white supremacy, but just to be real candid, someone in one of the attendees, actually, I believe it was on one of the webinars, said we had really disagreement with using white supremacy because it still had that word supreme. So still putting whites first, and that it should be called white crimes or white hatred or white violence.
Just to add that, or just say, if we say white supremacy, to add in that semicolon, what does it mean, right? Okay, white supremacy, we're talking about white crimes, white hatred, white violence against Black people or people of color.
And some people take the position it still should be used. So we're using all those terms to really have people think about it, encourage people to think about, language is important. So what language are we using? And the intention with these webinars is to participate in sustainable action and highlight the voices of Black and Brown, Indigenous, and people of color in community members, giving them a safe space to be heard about their own experiences, challenges, and hopes without the need to educate white people. It's also the purpose of the webinar to provide resources to increase everyone's that is attending and watching ability to self-educate towards becoming a more learned, allied, and participant in the social justice movement.
And those of you who are attending in the Facebook, the Zoom, you will get a follow-up email that has links to a lot of resources, some of which other people have compiled. And then there's a document that we've been compiling that has, 3 years worth of documentaries, podcasts, books, Black-owned businesses, Indigenous-owned businesses, and ways to support charitable bookstores, things like that. So you'll be getting a wonderful, huge stock of resources when this is over. Those of you on Facebook or YouTube, you're certainly welcome to email me at Misha@mishasafran.com to get those resources if you would like, or register for a webinar and get those. So you'll introduce yourself real quickly, and then I'll do the same.
So my name is Jody Lewis. I am an attorney. I work for a nonprofit organization, and I've worked in the nonprofit world for quite a long time now. And I represent survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence. The reasons that this webinar is so important to me is that as a white woman, I have and my ancestors have had a lot of privilege, and people have a hard time with that word too, that has come up in the webinars. But for me, it means that because of my race, which is a social construct, but because of being Caucasian, white, I have had, and my family, my ancestors have had benefits because of our systems and what our systems have put in place that have oppressed other people.
Thank you. And I am Misha Safran, and I was a teacher for 30 years, teaching French, Spanish at the middle school, high school, and community college level. I am now a leadership development trainer, coach, and consultant and speaker. I just published a book, not on systemic racism, but I did publish a book. And I am lighter than some and darker than others. And I also am my intersectionalities. I'm a woman. I do use she, they pronouns. I am gay. I also am Jewish, and a lot of other things. And I do have, even though I've had discrimination and I've had challenges, I also have a disability. I've also had benefits of having lighter skin and a family that was better suited in the world than some to start with. So I'm really excited to introduce our guest. And so I'm going to pull up our slide here and bring you all into the life of Earl Simms. And of course, it's not working for me right now. There we go. Okay. Okay. So introducing our dear friend, Earl Simms, a new friend, which is really exciting. We got to have dinner with Earl and his wife the other night, and we are all in a very important realm, social justice and restorative justice. And so I just want to share with you all about Earl, all that I can anyways. Earl Simms is the Executive Director of Restorative Community Solutions, which centers healing divided communities through individual, group, and community coaching. Earl grew up in Los Angeles and paroled to Oakland after serving 22 years in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. He works to battle the disease of violence, a disease that he had himself, and that he has designed, that has designed him to be effective in connecting and empowering others who are also battling violence. Earl has worked in the nonprofit sector since his release, ranging from a health navigator with Roots Community Health Center, intensive life coach with Oakland Unite while at Roots, and Bay Area Regional Director for Timeless Group, a housing provider. In addition, Earl is a member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC, a senior consultant with the Bright Research Group, sat on the formerly incarcerated advisory board, FIA, for the San Francisco District Attorney, George Gascon, and will be providing coaching to re-sentence populations under the Healing and Justice Initiative. Earl is dedicated to lifting up the voices of the community and those who are impacted by justice involvement. Earl is a certified community care coach, which amplifies his ability to empower clients and the community he serves. Earl, welcome. We are so happy to have met you, to become friends with you, and to welcome you into this space.
First, let me get off mic. I'm always the guilty party in a Zoom call and have to turn my mic off. It's like,
Well, you're unmuted now, and we don't want you to sit in silence. So here you go.
well, thank you for having me, and what an important conversation. I think it's something that our community feels very sensitive about, because I think when you talk about systems and you talk about racism, you know, it makes people feel uncomfortable and it doesn't feel safe to have those conversations. So, you know, respecting the language is so important, as you said, because we want this to be an inclusive conversation. And I'm not really good at these types of platforms, so I welcome questions, I welcome interaction. I probably could answer questions a lot better if there's, you know, questions asked directly to me. So please feel free to ask me any questions. But great to be here with you, and great to be, you know, that we have some alignment in some of the work that we want to do moving forward, have the same passion to help heal our communities, which my motivation comes from where I've been. And, you know, my living good means is, you know, I took someone's life. I took a young man's life in 1991. Subsequently served 22 years in a carceral setting. But the unique thing that happened to me was during the sentencing, I knew I was going to receive a lot of time, and at the time I was up under or looking at life through the lens of a gang member, you know, where I found support with individuals that were like me, and I felt like I could get the validation, the acceptance, and support that I was looking for, and I felt I didn't have at home. So I leaned on a conditional love that I thought was unconditional. And so when I was being sentenced, Alfonso's mother, during sentencing, I was expecting her to get up and just come after me and say that she wants me to spend the rest of my life in prison, but she didn't take that approach. And it was restorative in nature, the interaction. So having an opportunity to talk to someone's mother and that mother give you the grace for taking her own child was mind-boggling to me. And I think it was heavier than any life sentence or any type of carceral sentence that I had to serve, experiencing the internal shifting that happens that hurts, you know, when you realize what the type of harm that you cause in the community and the ripple effects that continuously happen after you throw that action, the proverbial pebble into the still waters. That ripple goes back and forth and touches multiple blades of grass multiple times and moves it and sways it. So there's so many people that are impacted. But, you know, having that interaction with Ms. Horton was truly transformative, and it planted a seed. You know, I went into the carceral setting because I had a life sentence, and because of the nature of my crime, I went to a level 4 first. So I had that seed planted, but still was trying to navigate this world and this violent experience that I found myself in. So, I stand before you, not making any excuses, not blaming the system, being completely accountable for what I did and how I harmed Alfonso, his family, and the community. Also, I'm not going to say, but also, there is a dynamic that led me down this path. And when you spoke to me about the title of this conversation, it made me think about in in 1980, in the mid 1980s, you had a rebellion in Nicaragua, and the government basically was funding the Nicaraguan rebellion because they couldn't stand behind it completely by allowing drugs to be trafficked into South Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. And so being there's consequences. So you have, gangs that are already present now have to protect the perimeter because this is their means of income, is to protect this area. Then you had the Iran-Contra scandal with Oliver North, where now, the guns that were being trafficked to Iran, now they have nowhere to go. So like in the 80s, early 80s, 83, 84, you had access to these weapons. Guys used to pull up and they'd have, a brand new AK-47, fresh out of the box, never used, $150, $250. Beretta gun, handguns, Uzis, things were readily available. So then when you think about it, you think about a system that lacks accountability. Instead of being accountable for supporting this rebellion, there was this underground agreement that poisoned the community. And it was a community that obviously wasn't highly regarded. If it was highly regarded, there wouldn't have been a lack of, there wouldn't have been that turn the other cheek when this influx of cocaine was being brought into the environment. Then subsequently, you had the war on drugs. Now, there was people who used drugs. There's some people that are in the political field now that were using cocaine. And it's been proven that they were using cocaine. But the response to crack cocaine was more extreme because it was a higher addictive form of using cocaine. But the sentencing, so when you talk about systemic guidelines and rules, where a person that was caught with the same amount of cocaine in Beverly Hills at a party didn't have the same type of impact on their life with the criminal justice system as someone who was in the urban area using crack cocaine. So you had this, from the war on drugs, you had this push towards mass incarceration. Now, mass incarceration was something that began after slavery, because when you think about slavery and mass incarceration, you're thinking about, I just want people to be open to think about, or I invite people to think about cheap labor. So, this was a means of income. This was financial. Slavery was financial. And the fact that, there wasn't anyone to pick the cotton, the agricultural lands, what could they do? So, you villainize this population that had served you well, and had already been like deprogrammed from any cultural attachment that they had to wherever they were from. And, unfortunately, there's so much good that comes with religion, but there's also a sense of control too. So the imposition of religions, throughout the world have had this impact, and there's a lot of blood on the hands of folks who misinterpret, how to build a positive community together. So, I mean, this is a conversation that there's so many layers of it. The war on drugs, we are still experiencing the ramifications of that. When you have people that are in opioids now in the street dying using fentanyl, but were introduced to drugs through big pharma. And there was a lawsuit. I want to say it was Walgreens or CVS for being responsible for the opioid pandemic. I mean, they literally had to pay millions of dollars. Was it? Hopefully you guys know. Maybe you could look it up.
You're gonna look it up. She's
Yeah,
a
I don't want to misstate it,
researcher.
but there's already been consequences handed out, you know, and it contributed to this, you know, response with opioids in our community. But that seed was planted because when you think about addiction and how it's passed down through generation to generation. You have someone who was addicted to heroin or crack cocaine or alcohol. You have a higher propensity to become addicted to another substance, lifestyle, whatever. So these are babies that have probably been impacted, or their family has been impacted. And I can only really speak from the perspective of a Black man and my experience in this world. So, you know, forgive me if I'm not offering or honoring someone else's lens, but I can only speak from my experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we invite you to do. So, you know, and I think that just to catch on that, I know Jody found it, but, you know, anytime we have a guest here, it's because their lens is important. Your voice is important. And people who are on this webinar, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or here inside our Zoom, you know, if you want the lens of others, then seek them out. Ask for them, research them. So go on Google. Google has a lot. But I think hearing your personal experience, and I think, well, before I go to that, you found out who it was, the lawsuits.
CVS and Walgreens.
Both of them.
There's a NPR story, December 13th of 2022, a $10 billion to settle lawsuits linked to opiate sales.
Yeah.
And then sorry,
No,
just
no,
really
no.
quick. Then you look on the news and you see or you hear these corporations acting like they're the victims when they actually played a part in contributing to why people were stealing from CVS and Walgreens. But there's a blind eye to that. You know, let's just look at the symptom. The symptom is this person is addicted to drugs, but the deeper rooted problem is the fact that we can prey on our own people in this country and it's okay. Human capital, or capital over human capital. And, you know, we see it in the food industry where we know that there's things that we shouldn't be consuming, but yet and still for profit margins. You know, there's shortcuts when it comes to cleaning the food, or how you even, you know, deal with the livestock prior to, you know, slaughter. So it's so layered. And then, you know, what type of impact does that have when you consume a meat that has, you know, right before, you know, was carried in the forklift and, you know, just mistreated and just full of fear, and that's being released into the body. So I kind of go all over the place, but I'm really into the threat response system, the vagal nerve, and how we respond to past trauma and how that trauma shows up as if it's, you know, that proverbial bear in the bushes is real, even if it's not. You know, we hear the twig break. Oh my God, it's a real bear, because I either heard the story, I saw someone mauled, or I've been attacked before. And so, how do we correct that? You know, I think when you talk about systemic barriers, I think it's to protect people that are fragile about the harm that they know exists, but they don't want to explore that because it's hard. It hurts. It hurts to know that you might be contributing to someone else's demise or hardships that they experience. You know, it's just like if you're driving down the street and you feel you're driving down the street in a $100,000 car and you're troubled by folks that are on the street. You know, you have a $100,000 car. There has to be somewhere in the back of your brain that, how am I contributing to this? I could pay $100,000 for a car, but watch my fellow human being suffer on the street and not even try to offer assistance, and, you know, allow, you know, these very same people to be criminalized for their lack of support. And, the byproduct of these big organizations that come into communities and extract, but they leave a void. It's like mining. Like if you think about mining, these big agencies can come and they bring talent from other places, so they displace more and more people, and then they can leave because of the tax breaks offered somewhere else, and then the void is left. Or if you're still there, why don't you feel like there should be an investment in the community to protect your own employees that have to come in and out? So I think it's a matter of a deeper thinking, and I really feel blessed to be part of conversations now as a consultant with agencies in San Francisco around the homeless response system, uplifting the voice of people with lived experience who know what it feels like to actually navigate these systems and give a snapshot or a different perspective of what it feels like to navigate those systems and ultimately course correct before it's too late.
One of the things you said, well, I mean, thinking about the war on drugs and, and people who are homeless and somebody who has $100,000 car, there's a phrase out there. Well, they should pick themselves up by their bootstraps. Well, some people's bootstraps are longer than others. Some people have longer arms than others. And it's all about like the equity, like when there are no resources, or you didn't start with those resources and you did, right? This person started with this and this person started with this. It's not this person's fault and it's not this person's fault, but there's a problem here. And so how do you bring equity? You share the space. In our society, it is not all for one and one for all. But it's been proven time and time again that when we all work together, we all do better.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, no, I was just going to say, Earl did say, he's open to questions. So if you want to, have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, both those that are attending or those on Facebook, because he did offer that, and then he'll decide whether he's going to answer the question or not. But because that's his choice. But certainly, yeah, please feel free to put in the chat.
I did forget to say something in the beginning. This stuff, and you said it, Earl, this stuff is not comfortable. Talking about this is not comfortable. And this may be uncomfortable for some people to hear this, but there are some people who, as soon as they open their front door, go through the next 16 hours of the day uncomfortable because of the color of the skin, because they're gay or lesbian, because they're, disabled. But so when you have the choice to be comfortable or uncomfortable, because you get to go, la, 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 I don't need to hear this. I just invite people to think about that. Like the fact that there are people here listening to us or on Facebook or YouTube, you're choosing to watch a horror film and be willing to sit in the uncomfortable. And I applaud you. And I really want to kind of hone in on that, because there are going to be times where you hear things. I know there are people often when people are accused of being racist because they participate in a racist system, they get very defensive and very upset. Instead of saying, you know what, you're right. Oh, let me have some curiosity here. I do belong to a system that is unjust. How can I participate in creating more just systems? Or even just in my own life, what can I do to bring some kind of love and compassion to those who are suffering? Doesn't mean you have to give them your whole pocketbook. It doesn't mean you have to live years and years and years of guilt because your ancestors or because you currently benefit from advantages that were built upon. But it's about having that mindset, educating yourself, doing, and being willing to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love how you said this is a safe space, a safe and brave space. And some of the DEI trainings that I've been a part of, a brave space is sometimes a choice of words for people to feel comfortable to be triggered or agitated or activated. Because, this is a touchy subject. And it is unique perspective. And when I think about a system that benefits one person, I like to think about chess, right? You have a chess game, and then you have one side that has all the pieces. And the queen is like one of the most powerful pieces, but the other side is missing that queen. So you start the game off with this inequity. And then the person that has the queen usually is the one saying, oh, they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But they've been given an opportunity to have what what I like to connect privilege to is safety. You know, if you have resources, your life is a little bit safer. And if you're moving through life and not feeling like there's a threat, constant threat, you haven't witnessed murder, you haven't been a victim of crime, you don't have to walk back by a corner where a friend of yours was gunned down every day, and what that does to you physiologically. And so like if you think about a kid that has to navigate that type of environment going to school, and he shows up with his earbuds in and his hoodie on, trying to get to his baseline, his or her baseline, just had to navigate, someone trying to encourage him to sell drugs or join a gang. Just getting to school he has to rely on that part of the brain. So being able to access the emotional and the frontal lobe where the thinking happens and the critical thinking happens, which isn't fully developed until you're 25, especially for boys. So when you think about how, I can watch the news, like when George Floyd died, that lands different with me and my experience as a Black man, not to be a victim or anything of the such, but there is something embedded in my mind when I see a police officer. I don't see safety. I see a threat, because first time I ever had a broken bone or fractured bone came from a police mag light to my ribs. Because I mean, there was a division in LA, the Rampart division, that was proven to be committing crimes against the folks that they were coming in encounter with. And so, people will tend to say, well, I can protect myself. If I see the police and you're coming to here, you cause more harm than the harm that was already responding to a harm. Then, what is that? What does that feel like? How can I get regulated in a healthy way? Sometimes there's football, sometimes there's school, sometimes there's things as an outlet. But when you have to navigate that world, what becomes more important to you is the lizard brain, the flight or fight system, because that keeps you alive. And that very same kid would be deemed as disruptive or has some kind of problem, or maybe even get dismissed or kicked out of class. Not even taking into consideration, he was just trying to become regulated for school, just to bring this to access his frontal lobe, just to, absorb the lesson. So, people can speak from a position of safety, not knowing what it feels like to be unsafe. And unsafety can look like food insecurity, it can look like abandonment, it can look like a lot of different things. But when you have a society that constantly is showing you that you're less than, you have, even if you think about the people that ran into the Capitol, there's a Black man still in jail that, no one's even thinking about, but there's a two-tiered system when those very same folks that might have voted for policies that now have to experience that policy, and they're saying, oh, well, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. This isn't fair to me. It's a two-tier justice system, when there's been groups that have been subjected to this for decades. So I think it is, it's like a veil of, and it's partially how we've been indoctrinated. It could come from even history lessons. I remember, I'm 54, so when I went, when I was in school, and we would learn about history in elementary school, it was a really short chapter about African American. It wasn't anything to empower me. It was, I came from slavery. there's a few people in there that had some contributions, but it's very, very small, very short, which plays a part in a person's self-worth and how they view themselves. So, we have these conversations about education and the importance of thinking critically around systems, education, institutions, but people want to shy away from that. There's a reason why. It makes you uncomfortable. I might be losing my privilege. It's, it would feel good if I could move through this world with a sense of privilege. Now I own a home. So I have an understanding, right? I have an understanding of what safety can feel like, at 54. But, me, one of the things that I'm always cautious about is, I would never want to reactivate any harm that I've caused to Alfonso, his family, or the community that was directly impacted, or first responders that had to witness, a young man grasping for his life. And I was the cause of that. So, I smile, I say things, but I know the weight and the responsibility of me bringing Alfonso into this room, because it's our story. It's impactful, not mine. It's us. It's our experience together. So yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do. I think it's important to hear the quantitative data, hearing from people, not me, but like people like me, to open the door to these opportunities is so important, because there's a genius there. Like, we figured out all kinds of things when we were in prison. Lack of resources make you super resourceful. And so, I think it's time to get creative. It's time to do something innovative. There's a push against restorative justice as something to work with traditional prosecution or can replace it in some circumstances. And there's this big push against that. But, people say, well, it's not going to work. It's too soft on crime. Well, we've never had a chance to have proof of concept around some of these things in the areas where we are. There's other areas that have done it, and there's really good numbers that come from it. But if you want to say that this is how you validate if it's something that's going to be effective or not, the status quo approach to criminal justice has shown an increase in crime over the span of time that it's existed, a constant increase in crime. So the status quo approach, you look at law enforcement agencies, you look at the origin of where, sheriffs come from, and the police was to catch slaves. So if this is, the definition or the origin of where you come from, there's still some of that baked in there, because just as if you and I, if us three were, we were writing the Constitution, guess who it would benefit? People like us. I got all this power. Yes, it's going to benefit me and my children. So, how do we get past the criminalization, the criminal mind thinking? One of the things that helped me to have that continuous epiphany and the growth of the seed that was planted, that Miss Horton planted in my heart, was, I had to realize that I was just a little child when I told myself I would never feel powerless when my stepfather was beating my mom at 10 years old. And I'm supposed to be the man of the house, all this internal dialogue. I couldn't save my mom. And I told myself right then and there, and that's when it flipped. You have these epiphanies in your life, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. But when you think about when I really had a shift in my mindset, it was a multitude of things. Even I remember watching a show about ER nurses, I think, and they were responding to people and how they were impacted by when someone was lost. And to see that, it broke me down to know that I've impacted so many people, and it's something that you're not supposed to do. But it feels good to do it because I needed validation. I didn't have that self-worth. You know, everything was telling me that I wasn't valuable, even from history to the experiences that I've had growing up, and what I've seen and how we've been treated by the police. All these different things told me that I wasn't worthwhile. So why would I spare someone who looked just like me? I had no remorse. I would give other people from other ethnicities or backgrounds, they wouldn't even be on my radar. I was after, it was so much self-hatred that I saw myself in these other guys. And we were divided by color or, geography. A street or two, an alley separated us, but it was really me hating myself and projecting that hatred out into the community. And it was also what I like to call a passive form of suicide. I was afraid to kill myself in my bitterness and this torture and this lack of safety. But if I involved myself in a lifestyle that made it risky, then somebody might do it for me. And so how do we disrupt that when this goes all the way back to my family being slaves and having to buy their way out of freedom, and then coming from a few generations of military service members, who go into a fight for the very same system that oppresses their kids and create systems to consume their kids. So, having that positive role model is super important. If you don't have anyone to look up to, then, is what I'm seeing from the youth. I hate to be divisive, like, oh, them youngsters, but what I see is, there's a validation that's not real. The like, the thumb, the view. How does that really give you currency? Let your character be the currency. It's not, it's the content that you can put out is gives you the value and the validation.
Well, and Earl, thank you for sharing all that and your vulnerability and your willingness to expose yourself, right, with all of us. And the fact that you're making this living amends to Alfonso and to his mother, Miss Horton. I think that there were a couple things you said, and I know you have some thoughts because I could feel it. One thing you said was, if we don't do it, we don't have the data. I mean, Mrs. Horton is one piece of data. She exercised restorative justice with you. Like, I just got emotional saying that. She was so loving towards, I don't want you to have a life sentence. She wants change. She could see that you were capable of change, which is the opportunity you got to have, and to do the work that you're doing now to pay it forward in a positive way. So that's one thing I wanted to say, like this, that component of restorative justice was in her, right? And then you followed up and you're doing it. And there are other people that are doing it, but the system is the people that run the system are so afraid of a takeover, or so afraid of, even I know that I'm afraid of forgiveness. I've been sexually assaulted, date raped. Like, there's a part of me like, I never want to see them people again. But I also know that hurt people, right? And so that's another component that I think you're bringing into the work that you're doing, is helping people heal the hurt so they don't continue hurting other people or themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was liberation for Miss Horton too.
Yeah.
In that, and what she said? She said, I see my son was just like him. He would have done anything for his friends. And this could have very well been my son in that chair and Earl on that table. Mm-hmm. And because what they did is they showed a picture of Alfonso on the morgue table to his mom, and it was just, I don't know, it was so emotional. One of the things that, when you're in a gang, when you get involved in the gang lifestyle or you get in a disruptive behavior, a lot of that is just a mask for the hurt that you've experienced and the trauma that you've experienced. You wear this mask of a lack of, this detachment phase when you're really scared or you're really hurt or you're really, there's something deeper. And it takes a lot to get there. Like, you know, us as lifers, we had to go in front of the board of parole hearings, and we had to go through the stringent process of insight. Yeah, they kept denying us for insight. So we had to explore and look deeper into what led me down a path where I could justify taking a life. Because, you know, in my mind, my response coming into the courtroom, if this would have happened this way, of, you know, I want him to spend the rest of his life in prison, this and that. I had a preempted like response of, he shouldn't have been gangbanging. I mean, like, if it would have happened to me, I wouldn't have been, you know. And so there was this justification for my behavior, and I had to get past that to be completely honest with myself, and literally telling myself. And that's something that the culture that, you know, we were raised in was, you know, you don't tell on anybody, let alone yourself. You just don't say anything. And so how can I ask for help if I'm not saying anything? And how do we send that message to young people that need help, that don't know how to ask for help? And I think, you know, right now you hear a lot about mental health disorders and diagnoses, and some people make fun of it and say, well, you didn't hear all this when you were younger, but that's not a good thing, because we had untreated diagnoses that could have prevented us from doing some of the things that we did. And I was making a point earlier about selfishness, right? And when I discovered that one of the key roots in addiction, because I was doing 12-step programs, we didn't have that many. So we created one ourselves, a support group inside, which turned into a nonprofit out here that provides housing, where I used to work for, the Timeless Group. And the selfishness, like, if I'm gonna use drugs and I know it's destroying my mom, I'm so selfish and caught up into myself that I don't care who it hurts. It's the same thing with being a criminal. And so we have policies that function the same way a criminal thinks. Then you have what's called, the byproduct of that is policy violence. So you have like situations that occur in communities on a large scale that are a direct result of a policy that is self-serving, selfish, self-focused, money class focused. It's not inclusive to everyone. So the policy is only going to be applied to a certain set of people. And so like these things are, you know, people talk about it and can label it in different ways, but it's a way, it's how you colonize. If you want to take over a neighborhood, what do? Divide the people that live in the neighborhood, and then you offer incentives to move out, and then, or you spike the rent. You know, I saw a comment on LinkedIn about someone made a comment about nonprofits being slumlords or something like that, slumlords. But who's the real slumlord when the nonprofit is master leasing from someone that has gouged the nonprofit? So the slumlord sounds to me like it's the developer or the, you know, these people that put all this money into these politicians' hands. And in turn, the politicians become puppets for the money class. And a lot of times these people aren't native to the area where they live. And so they come in and they not only have they extracted and displaced, but now they have power over the people that actually built the city which they occupy now. And that money doesn't go back into the community. Sometimes it goes to other places in the world. You know, so it's this extraction and this displacement of wealth, displacement of resources, and it goes somewhere else, not back into the community. And when these politicians and decision makers really wanted to make an impact on homelessness, if you want to come and do business in my city, you should, and you're lucrative, you should be paying a certain type of tax, right? They have some of these initiatives in place, but you're making so much money off of causing harm, selling alcohol, selling opioids. You know, if you look at the difference, if you go into a well-to-do neighborhood you won't see a lot of liquor stores, but if you go in the hood, you're gonna see a liquor store everywhere.
And you'll see the liquor stores and not many grocery stores.
Not many grocery stores, so it's a food
Store.
desert.
Yeah,
Okay, so let me get full off of this beer versus a nutritious meal.
yeah,
You know,
right.
and so it's so complicated. I think we could talk about this for
Days.
you could make a series out of it. Just with me and whoever else comes to talk, you could have them come back.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, I like that term policy violence, I think is so accurate. And it comes down to when we look at policies, who's making the policies. And, there's often, that this is what the policy is for, but then what's underneath that, what's really behind a certain policy. And even when we look at movements that have looked to do the right thing, for lack of a better way to put it, like if we look at the Battered Women's movement, what happened was that it wasn't inclusive, it wasn't taking in all voices. So white women were pushing for more law enforcement involvement, but that wasn't good for communities of color because law enforcement means something very different. So when we look at policy, I think it's real important that we all really start to dissect it and really look at what's behind it. Is it the real thing behind it to continue to oppress and suppress certain voices so that this society continue in this capitalist way where affluent, more often white males are here and other people are not. And then, that idea of, we live in a society that is so individualistic still, and that's a white supremacy culture. When you look at organizations that many people can't see how that piece makes us not function as well. Because when we work together and we all have that equity in different forms, there's all kinds of research that it benefits us, but that just gets dismissed or put to the side because, people want to continue living the way, quote unquote, they are, those that have it, right, that have all the benefits without realizing where we could be if we dismantled that piece.
I mean, if you think about if you look at it, physically, and think about the lower class, the bottom, right, kind of holding up the middle and the upper class, but there is no middle. The middle, the disparity is growing, right? So it's top heavy. And if it's top heavy, it's unstable. And so now you have people that have tremendous wealth. They live a certain kind of life that only some can dream of. Capitalism and the way it's promoted is we want to strive for that. Everyone has that, this is the land of opportunity. You can come and you can take advantage of this. Some people have, some of the chess pieces, have the full chess pieces, and some people have 2 or 3 pieces missing, right? And so how do we get the value from a person who may not have the verbal capacity to express themselves in a way that systems can understand it, and so I can understand there is a sense of gatekeeping that happens also when a person has sacrificed years of their life, has owed money into educational institutions for years and still is in debt, and they see someone with lived experience being brought to a similar level because of the experience holds a certain amount of value. It's just like when you come out of college, right? You come out of college, the person that has some job experience has an advantage over even the person that's what is it, magna cum laude or whatever? I don't see, there I go with the verbs. I don't have the verbiage, but the experience is just as valuable, not more valuable, but it's just as valuable, because when you bring both of them into perspective, it just uncovers more. You just get more information about how things can be applied, and you can disprove things that already exist, you know. So like I was saying about the statistics of crime and, you know, crime and punishment, we invest in law enforcement and these responses that only trigger more trauma. When I went to jail, I experienced more trauma in jail. So like on top of that, if I didn't have the requirement that was put on me under my circumstances, and the fact that I had a son, and the fact that I had this experience with Miss Horton and her family, you know, I wouldn't be here. I just wouldn't be here, because when you're inside and you have a life sentence, you go in front of the board multiple times, you get denied for the seriousness of the case. You're like, well, the seriousness of the case is never going to change, so I'm never going to get out. So I could continue with this downward thinking spiral and live how I want to live, which is counterculture, because going along with the culture hurts. So why not go against the culture? At least I know it's going to be painful. I know what I'm walking into. I'm swimming up the current. So there's a benefit, you know, you from experience, you come out the other end with a sense of wisdom versus just knowledge, that you can be an example and model something different. So what we've been trying to do is push to bring people with lived experience, build their capacity and skill set to be able to communicate what they get from the community. So participatory action research is some of the work that we do. And that is where you share power with the community, allow them to have a skill set to measure something from the community level, from that perspective, from that, you know, ground level versus the helicopter view of, you know, I remember one of my teachers told me that people get a lot of intellect and they become these helium heads and they swell up and kind of glide above everybody and look down at everybody.
That's a scary vision.
Well, I mean, it kind of happened to me, because look, I got a balloon. You know, I don't want to get shot as a spy balloon or something. Like we saw it on Facebook. But I think there, with the institutions, even in education, sometimes there's a programming or a school of thought that sends a person down a trajectory to want to defend a system that they've invested in, to say, okay, if I have this knowledge, this is going to help me in a system. So this is what I invested in. So why would I want to divest in a system that helped me? You know, so it's really deep. And I think when you want to address it, it can't come from someone like me. I'm designed to talk to people who are criminally justice impacted, who had suffered from mental illness, have suffered loss, have experienced tremendous loss, have caused tremendous harm and loss. I'm designed to talk to people that have very similar circumstances. So when it comes to, you know, fighting on multiple levels, I think it is a picture of different diverse colors that can talk to different parts of the system and the problem. And then you get a fuller picture and you can get a different type of engagement. Because when I see someone who looks like me, who's been through the stuff I've been through, it's easier for me to trust that person.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
you guys
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, we're coming up on the end of the hour. So I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. First of all, thank you, Earl. And please feel free to put your company's name, the work that you and your wife do, in the chat to everyone, and then we'll add it to the Facebook and we'll add it to the YouTube description. If you are, you know, more those of you who are listening or know people who might be interested in having Earl and Aaron and their services to support restorative justice, we really highly recommend this couple. They are fabulous. And then a couple of things. So we're going to shortly, after we say thank you and unofficial goodbye, we're going to stop the live stream. We're going to stop the recording, and we're going to invite anybody who's actually attending the webinar to come in and just have casual conversation with us. And so what that requires is I invite you to come in and be a panelist, and you can vocally come on in. and just take turns if you have questions. And we do that for about 15, 20 minutes. And then we say goodbye to everybody else. And then we say our own goodbye to Earl on our own. But yeah, absolutely. So let me say it out loud. So Earl put in the chat, Restorative Community Solutions. It's a 501c3, Stargaze LLC Consulting. And we will get that information to everyone. And also, let me just put that back in there. Yeah, so anything, Earl, that you would like to say to those listening, maybe something you desire, a wish, a hope, or just like a get it off my chest kind of thing. Is there anything you'd like to end with?
Oh my goodness. I just invite people to become a part of bringing awareness to others. I think we all have tremendous power, more power than we even know. And this is something, I mean, if you stayed on here this long to listen to me talk, you obviously care, but you gotta have some resilience. But it must mean something to you. And I think it's important to get involved in these movements in any way possible. Know your rights and vote. Can't stress that enough. Vote. Your vote matters.
Thank you. And again, the email is going to go out to everybody who was on the webinar with all the resources that we have. And, I think the last question we like to leave people is what is one thing that you can do either this week or between now and the next webinar, should you choose to join us at next time? What is one thing you can do that is sustainable? We've been doing this webinar for 3+ years. It is sustainable for us. We also read that is sustainable for us. What is one thing that you feel you can commit to doing that is sustainable part of your growth and becoming a learned participant in dismantling racism, systemic racism? Any closing words for you?
Earl, thank you so much for being here this evening and sharing your experiences and your thoughts about systemic racism and about life, really. And I just encourage people to really think and engage when you're looking at policies or hearing the news or whatever it is on your day-to-day basis, because so often we're so used to things in so many ways that we don't do that deep dive that sometimes is needed and sometimes not. Sometimes it's really obvious when a policy comes out that what the real intent of the policy is, which is to suppress or oppress people. But really encourage you to take a step back and be curious about it and examine it. So really examine why we are one of the only modern countries that has not changed our constitution and what that means. Yeah. So
thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's say goodbye to Facebook. Bye, Facebook. See y'all. Let's see. Stop there.
The host has stopped broadcasting the webinar on Facebook.
Okay.
That's something in our Zoom settings. And I'm like, oh, this guy is annoying.
All right. And now I'm going to stop the recording. Bye, everybody.